There's really probably four things I'm thinking about when we think about the 2020 and what that represents for ETFs. So first of all, when we think about ETF flows, which is really where the money's moving, there's no question that during that COVID period, during that volatility, there was a lot of pressure, there was a lot of outflows. And for a long time, we've had a lot of questions around how are ETFs going to perform under intense volatility. So it was really great to see that they perform with flying colours. I think that test that everyone was waiting for really executed during that period. So we certainly saw some outflows during that period, but we've seen a really strong amount of inflows across a broad range of ETFs since that time. So that's across US equities, across fixed income, they've been really strong. So it's great to see, and we're probably going to see one of the better ETF inflow years that we've ever seen out of this year. So I think that's a really interesting dynamic. I think when we think about Australia, a couple of things come to mind. One is there's certainly been a shift from, and what the core tenet of what ETFs have been for a lot of investors for a long time is international investing, is actually using hedging as part of that process. So we've seen, again, during the COVID period, the Australian dollar had a really strong run. So we saw a lot of switching out into the hedged version of, say, international equities ETF to not, lose money on that currency move. So that was an interesting sort of dynamic, and we may be seeing that again with whatever happens based out of where the pandemic runs from here. I think two more things. I think we certainly have seen a change in investors' profile. So you've probably seen a lot of influx of a newer demographic of investors, newer investors, and they really are a younger cohort. And partly because they're a younger cohort, and not to say that the older cohort aren't using ETFs, we've seen a lot of strong use from direct investors in self-managed super funds and ETFs, but this younger cohort are really comfortable with ETFs as an investment tool. So we are seeing a real abundance and take-up of ETFs out of that new cohort. On the flip side of that, we're also seeing really strong institutional use of ETFs. So historically, what we've seen globally was a really strong base of institutional use. That's been the case for the US and Europe, for the whole 20 years of ETFs use. But Australia never really grasped onto that. Over the past year, we've really seen strong institutional use from the super fund sector, from the insurance sector. So it's really going to be interesting to see what we look at going forward when we combine both a younger demographic and an institutional use around ETFs in the future.